The mockery of humanity of the world laughed at humanity. They called them weak, divided, and unprepared for what was coming. Nations spent their time fighting each other over borders, resources, and old grudges. The people of Earth, distracted by their own issues, never saw the storm brewing just beneath the waves. For years, the surface world had focused on weapons of war missiles, fighter jets, and ground troops. The oceans were just there to be crossed. But what they didn't know was that beneath the surface, something far more dangerous was quietly preparing. Nations mocked humanity's weakness, thinking that no one could stand up to the might of their armies. After all, humanity had been fractured for so long. Economies were weak, governments were corrupt, and most of the world was just trying to survive. The powerful looked down on the rest, believing that their dominance was untouchable. But in the silence of the deep oceans, something changed. It started as a whisper, rumor of strange signals intercepted by a few military bases. Some dismissed them as nothing, just noise. But the whispers grew louder. Ships began to disappear. The first one vanished without a trace in the middle of the Atlantic. No wreckage, no survivors, just gone. Then, more ships disappeared one by one from different corners of the globe. At first, it seemed like coincidence. But as the disappearances piled up, it was clear someone was targeting these ships, and that someone wasn't on land. Countries sent their fleets to investigate. They sent satellites and submarines into the depths. They found nothing, no signs, no enemy ships, no radar signals. It was like they were chasing shadows, and still the world laughed. They thought it was just the weather, or maybe pirates, or some freak accident. But there was one thing no one realized. Those who disappeared weren't just lost, they were being silenced behind the scenes. Certain people in power started to notice patterns. There were subtle signs that something big was happening, something that was being kept hidden. Some spoke of secret underwater projects that had been shut down years ago. Others talked about strange disappearances within military ranks. No one had any answers. No one wanted to speak up. But something didn't feel right. The surface world was too busy fighting among themselves to realize that a far more dangerous force had been silently building strength beneath their feet. In the depths of the oceans, a secret fleet had been growing. It was a fleet like no one had ever seen before, built with technology that was decades ahead of what the world's most powerful nations had. And it wasn't just a fleet, it was an army that had been trained, hidden, and prepared for the right moment to reveal itself. No one knew who was behind it. No one knew how long it had been there, but they would soon find out. Meanwhile, the world's leaders continued to mock humanity. They thought they were in control. They thought that power came from the air, from the land, and from the firepower of their weaponry. But they didn't understand. They didn't see that real power wasn't above them, it was below. And when it finally emerged, they would regret underestimating humanity. At the same time, in an undisclosed location, a group of high-ranking military officers gathered. They had seen the reports. They had heard the rumors. They knew something was coming, but they had no idea what it was. They called it a potential threat, but no one in the room fully understood the scale of the danger. Some of them were already starting to think that maybe the rumors weren't rumors at all. Maybe there was something under the ocean, watching, waiting, growing stronger. But by the time they figured it out, it would be too late. The world's powers were too busy arguing over borders, too consumed by their own internal problems. They couldn't see the bigger picture. They didn't realize that the future of the Earth wasn't going to be decided by the countries with the most bombs or the fastest jets. It would be decided by something far more ancient and far more dangerous as the days went on. The disappearances continued, but the world ignored the signs, too wrapped up in their own egos and pride. They laughed at the idea that something could challenge their strength. They believed the surface world was all that mattered. They were wrong, and soon they would learn the truth. The secret underwater fleet was rising, and humanity would show them just how wrong they were. Asterisk, the first sign of power. It started with a quiet tremor beneath the waves, a ripple that no one could explain. At first, no one noticed. But soon, the ocean's silence was broken by something that could not be ignored. The first sign was subtle. A naval fleet on a routine mission in the Mediterranean. It was supposed to be a simple exercise, a training run, but it ended in disaster. The ships vanished, one by one, as if they had been swallowed by the ocean itself. There were no explosions, no gunfire, just silence. The crew had no chance to send a distress signal. They simply disappeared. For days, the world speculated. Was it a freak accident? A malfunction? Maybe a tsunami that no one had detected? But no one could explain the most important part. The ships weren't damaged. No wreckage was ever found. They were just gone. That's when the world began to stir. Governments scrambled to find answers, launching investigations. They scoured the oceans, analyzing sonar readings, sending underwater drones into the depths. What they found was even more confusing. Nothing, no ships, no debris, no signs of what had happened. Then it happened again. This time it was a convoy of merchant vessels traveling through the South Pacific. They were carrying goods between nations, completely unaware that they were about to become part of an event that would shake the world. Once again, the ships vanished. But this time, the communications stopped before anyone even realized something was wrong. It didn't take long for the world's most powerful militaries to start acting. They couldn't afford to ignore the strange disappearances anymore. Warships and submarines were sent into the area, but when they arrived, they found nothing. The ocean was calm. To calm, there was something eerie about the way the disappearances occurred. The ships were never found. It was as if they were wiped from existence. Yet, the sea held no answers. As the world's leaders gathered in emergency meetings, panic began to spread. The question on everyone's mind was simple. Who was doing this, and why? Meanwhile, deep underwater, a new force was stirring. It wasn't just a fleet of ships. It was a vast armada, hidden for years beneath the surface of the ocean. The technology that powered these ships was unlike anything the world had ever seen. Submarines capable of traveling at unimaginable speeds, underwater drones with advanced weaponry, and above all, ships that could move without a sound, slipping through the waters like ghosts. The world's leaders tried to reassure their people. They claimed there was no threat, that everything was under control. But the situation was growing more complicated by the hour. Reports of strange signals, unexplained electromagnetic disruptions, and the sudden disappearance of more ships became too frequent to ignore. Something was out there, and it wasn't going away. The whispers of an underwater force grew louder. Some nations began to suspect the truth, but no one was brave enough to speak openly about it. Governments were too proud to admit that there was something they couldn't control, something that had been hiding beneath the waves for centuries, silently growing stronger. In one quiet corner of the world, however, a single person decided to take action. A A whistleblower, a former military officer, began to leak information to the press. In a series of anonymous messages, they revealed the existence of an underwater fleet, one built and maintained by a hidden society of humans who had left the surface world long ago. According to the leaks, this fleet was not a small force, it was massive, built for one purpose: to reclaim the Earth from the surface dwellers who had abandoned the oceans, forgotten their origins, and destroyed their planet. This society had been planning in the shadows for generations. They had never sought to conquer the surface world until now. The whistleblower's revelations sent shockwaves through the global community. Governments tried to silence the reports, but the damage had already been done. The idea of a hidden, powerful force living beneath the waves was too much for the world to ignore. What if it was true? What if these mysterious forces were real? The surface world had been too busy with its own problems, wars, politics, resources, to notice the one thing that truly mattered. The sea had been silent for far too long now. The silence was over, as global tensions reached a breaking point, and as the world scrambled to understand what was happening beneath the surface, humanity's hidden army made its move. The Armada, built from generations of secret technology and hidden plans, slowly began to surface. The first sign was a massive fleet of ships emerging from the depths, more advanced than anything the surface world could have imagined. But instead of starting an attack, the fleet did something strange. They simply appeared, towering above the ocean's surface, their massive forms casting shadows over the water. They didn't fire a single shot, but their presence alone was enough to send the world into chaos. As military leaders scrambled to respond and scientists rushed to understand the technology, one thing became clear: humanity's hidden fleet was far more powerful than anyone could have imagined, and it was about to change the world. The revelation: the world had never been so unsure. Every nation had been rattled by the appearance of the underwater Armada. But there was something deeper, something no one understood yet. They had seen the fleet emerge, but what they didn't know was that the full scale of the power humanity had hidden beneath the waves was far beyond their worst fears. As the days passed, the world's military powers scrambled to organize, preparing for a potential attack. They studied satellite images, trying to identify the massive ships that had emerged from the depths. They ran calculations on the advanced technology, which was so far beyond anything they had that it felt like they were trying to match the knowledge of ancient civilizations. Yet, the Armada did not strike. It hovered, silent and unnerving, but it did not move forward with aggression. This made the world even more uneasy. Was it a waiting game? What were they planning? Were they testing the surface world? Or was there something else hidden in the shadows? And then the truth came out. It wasn't from an intelligence agency or military official. It came from someone who had been in the heart of the project, someone who had been there from the very beginning. The whistleblower, once just a shadowy figure leaking hints and whispers, finally revealed their identity. Dr. Kazuki Ito, a former naval officer who had disappeared from the public eye years ago, stepped forward with a video. He appeared on screen, a look of exhaustion on his face, his voice trembling as he spoke. "The time has come for the truth to be known," he began, his eyes darting to the side, as if checking for anyone who might be listening. "You've been lied to, all of you. The Armada you've seen isn't the product of some unknown enemy. It's humanity's salvation, and it's been hidden beneath the ocean for centuries. The fleet you see, those ships are not alien. They are ours. They were built by us, by a society that left the surface world long ago, when it became too corrupt, too violent, too reckless. They knew that the Earth's future didn't lie above ground, in the hands of governments who could not see past their own egos. Ito's voice grew louder, more intense. We built the Armada in secret to survive the coming storm. The oceans would be our sanctuary, our stronghold. The world was doomed by greed, by war. We saw what humanity was doing to the Earth, and we knew something had to be done. We couldn't stop it then, but we've been preparing. And now, the time has come to reclaim the Earth. The world went silent as the video cut off. Dr. Kazuki Ito had been one of the leaders of the secret underwater society. He had been part of the original group that built the Hidden Fleet, a group that fled the surface world when it became clear that civilization's days were numbered. Their mission had never been to attack. It had always been about survival. Now, they were ready to reveal themselves. The revelation sent shockwaves through the globe. It was true. The Armada wasn't some rogue force from an alien world. It was humanity's own hidden legacy. A society of people who had seen the writing on the wall and had chosen to act. They had abandoned the surface when the oceans began, to be poisoned by pollution and war. They had chosen the deep, where humanity's future could thrive away from the destruction caused by greed and corruption. But now they were back. The world had no idea how to respond. Some leaders declared that the Armada needed to be destroyed at all costs. Others demanded immediate peace talks, hoping to avoid war. Yet neither side truly understood what they were facing. In the midst of all the chaos, military officials scrambled to make sense of the Armada's strength. They couldn't even begin to comprehend the technology behind the massive ships that had appeared. These weren't just battleships. They were living, breathing creations. The ships were powered by an energy source the world had never seen before, one that defied all current laws of physics. Experts began to hypothesize that the ships weren't just technological marvels, they were something more. They were symbiotic, interwoven with the ecosystems of the ocean itself. They could move silently and with a power that no nation on the surface could match. Some even whispered that the ships had been grown, built with biological materials that were centuries ahead of anything known to mankind. But while the rest of the world scrambled to understand what they were dealing with, Dr. Kazuki Ito issued another statement. Humanity's time on the surface is over. The oceans are no longer just a resource, they are our future. The Earth belongs to those who respect it, and we have come to show you what happens when that respect is lost. For the first time, the surface world understood the true stakes. This was not a war of conquest. This was a battle for the future of humanity, and the surface world had no idea how much danger it was in. As global leaders raced to formulate responses, they realized something far more troubling. There was no way to stop the fleet. The technology was too advanced, the power too great. Humanity's secret weapon had come to reclaim what was rightfully theirs. The world's leaders may have mocked humanity's strength before, but now they would have to face the truth. They had underestimated humanity for too long, and the consequences would be far more severe than they ever imagined. The final confrontation, the world had never been in such turmoil. The revelations of humanity's hidden armada had thrown everything into chaos. Leaders, once confident in their power, were now scrambling. Some sought to negotiate peace, others prepared for war. But no one truly understood what they were dealing with. The Armada was not a force that could be bargained with, nor one that could be defeated through conventional means. These ships were more than just military vessels. They were a new form of life, born from the sea itself. Powered by energy sources that defied all understanding, they were unstoppable. And their mission was clear. Humanity's future belonged to those who had protected the Earth, not to those who had ravaged it. The final confrontation began when the Armada made its move. It wasn't an all-out attack. It was something far more terrifying. The first wave of ships moved silently across the oceans, entering the heart of global capitals. They didn't fire a single shot, but their presence was enough to send a message. Cities that once stood tall, proud in their arrogance, now found themselves dwarfed by the enormous power of the fleet in Washington, D.C. The government issued a statement calling for international unity. They proposed talks, but the message from the underwater fleet was clear. There would be no negotiations. Humanity had already chosen its path. The time for words had passed. The Armada began to deploy its most fearsome weapon, the ability to control the oceans themselves. Waves surged in an instant, large enough to drown entire fleets. These were not just ships, they were environmental catalysts, capable of creating violent storms, powerful currents, and earthquakes. As the fleets above tried to retaliate, they were quickly overwhelmed by the relentless forces of nature. In Paris, a global summit was taking place. It was supposed to be a meeting of world leaders, but it quickly turned into a chaotic scramble for survival. The moment the first ship appeared on the horizon, panic set in. Those who had dismissed the Armada as a bluff now realized the truth: they were no longer in control. Military forces tried to mount a defense, but it was futile. Every missile, every bomb, every jet was useless against the Armada's power. The ocean itself fought back. Ships and submarines sent into the water were destroyed before they could even make it close. The fleet's ships were capable of diving to depths no man-made vessel could reach, evading detection and strikes with ease. Back in the depths of the sea, Dr. Kazuki Ito, the whistleblower, watched the unfolding events. He wasn't leading the Armada anymore. He was simply a witness to the final stages of humanity's reckoning. He had seen the destruction of the surface world coming long before anyone else. The global leaders who had abandoned their responsibilities had sealed their fate. But it wasn't just about destruction. Humanity's hidden Armada wasn't there to wipe the surface clean. It was there to take back what was always meant to be theirs. The fleet's leaders, those who had stayed beneath the surface for centuries, didn't want to conquer the world. They wanted to restore balance. They wanted to ensure that the Earth would be protected once again, this time by those who truly understood the consequences of ignoring the planet's needs. As cities across the world trembled in fear, a final broadcast came through. It wasn't from the leaders of the Armada. It was a simple message from Dr. Ito. His voice, once filled with urgency, now echoed through every broadcast system on Earth. "You had your chance," he said softly. "Humanity had its chance to lead, but you chose greed. You chose war. You chose to destroy. Now we choose peace for those who are willing to listen. The oceans are our future, and we will protect them. The Earth will survive, but only if we stop fighting it." The screen cut off, and the world held its breath. In that moment, every nation realized the same thing. They had underestimated humanity's power. They thought they could control the oceans. They thought they were the masters of the Earth. But now, the true power had risen from the depths, and it was clear that it would never be the same. The surface world was forced to make a decision. They could continue their path of destruction, attempting to fight back against the overwhelming power of the Armada. Or they could choose to change, to respect the planet and the oceans that had given them life. But one thing was certain: humanity's greatest secret was now out in the open, and the world would never again look at the oceans the same way. The Armada had shown its strength, and humanity's survival was no longer a question of dominance, it was a question of balance. As the final battle loomed, Dr. Ito knew the truth. The surface world would either accept their fate or be destroyed, and humanity's future would be decided by those who had the courage to change.